and welcome to our new webinar for Building Smart chapter in UAE. This is our 7th free webinar. Today we have Mr. Vijay Raina, who is one of the early adopters of BIM, mechanical engineer by education, and was working as a BIM manager, MAP, before joining Autodesk about 4 years ago. Mr. Raina worked as a senior technical and sales specialist by Autodesk, and today he will talk about how to prepare BIM models for facility management and why this is important. So, Mr. Vijay, if you are ready, please take the stage and go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. Yes, I'm going to share my screen now, and let's get started with that. If you can confirm seeing the screen, please.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, may I request everyone to mute yourself in case, otherwise it's going to bring some lot of noise in the background. So if you have any question in between, don't keep it with you, share it in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we can answer some of them. And if not, you can connect with me later on to get those answers as well. So we'll not let you without answers, maybe today or day after. So thank you, first of all, for joining today. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is in collaboration with Building Smart UAE chapter, Dubai Municipality, and thanks to Dr. Ali and his team for facilitating the webinar, which is a free webinar for, I would say, all the BIM enthusiasts in the Dubai and other regions. So today's topic is about preparing BIM models for facility management. My name is Vijay Raina. I'm based in Dubai, working as senior technical specialist at Autodesk. Now, Dr. Ali already spoke about me, so I'm a mechanical engineer, have been working in the industry. I joined Autodesk around 10 plus years back, but in Singapore. And then I was handling the ASEAN region at that time. Then I came back to Dubai around 6 years earlier. I have been working in Dubai for 4 years before that as well. So it's been around 10, 12 years in Dubai and the Middle East market as well. And apart from working in the India, and I cover, as part of my Autodesk role, I also cover Africa as my territory, and I help customers to get started with the BIM and educate about what's the BIM and what are the advantages and why everyone should be, because this is what I believed many years back when I started with my own BIM journey, to let the AC industry lead the future of making. So agenda for the today is very simple. So a quick overview of today's agenda is where we will look at the current industry challenges, followed by a quick overview of BIM for owners as well, including the BIM for facility management, operations, asset management. We will also explore the 3 big questions every organization or project must answer before moving to the journey of getting BIM ready post handover phase. We also have a quick look at the possibility of using tools, processes, and techniques to help projects achieve their goals. As we understand the project cost variation across building lifecycle, it's almost 80% towards the post-completion into the operations, assets, facility management. So upfront cost of the designing and construction is a large sum. We understand that, but the lifespan of the built environment does have a major portion of the overall cost of the project. And this is where majority of the time the owners have to think post-construction, how are they going to make efficient plans and efficient decisions today at a planning stage itself to make that 80% be more valuable at the end of the project. Now, traditionally, as we see the disparate teams work together, it's not easy to deliver based in different locations and delivering on different scope of work. The consultants, the contractors, the sub-consultants, the subcontractors, project managers, coordinating the project milestone, juggling that data handover and contract requirement, which leads to additional challenges in itself. And as a project becomes more complex, this data is being rapidly iterated at a high frequency across the teams. Bad information and data silos across companies lead to the massive waste that is prevalent in delivering projects, and distributed teams are hurt by delays in communication and waste time searching for the right project information and maintaining the data consistency needed in the project phases ahead. Every single time a handover occurs between teams or across phases, a data loss occurs, leading to inefficiencies and risk. And as a project becomes more complex, this data is being rapidly iterated at high frequency across teams. Bad information and the data silos across companies lead to the massive waste that is prevalent in delivering projects. And distributed teams are hurt by delaying in communication and waste in time searching and making the earlier information relevant to their own phase of the project, because this may not be available in the format they would benefit. It might be something in a drawing format, something might be in an Excel format. Of course, this costs heavily on a project, which we all understand. So we at the end of a project, if I ask you one question and maybe you can start typing the answers, who at the end of the project pays for the information gathering? Isn't it the project owner at the end of the project? So they still have to pay for that lag. But so and what we have seen a desired shift in is the need of an hour where the BIM or building information modeling becomes the catalyst to capture the project data and carry forward the information to all the phases of the project, including the post handover. Honestly, a lot of projects in the region do have BIM requirements, but majorly concentrates on few of the BIM benefits, such as coordination, design review, etc. only. There is still a data drop, data conversion, and a lot of 2D going to the construction sites. A lot of BIM submissions happen just to fulfill the 3D submission requirements, while 2D drawings are done separately. Or let's put it this way, 2D documentation isn't extracted from the same BIM model. When we investigate this industry challenge, we often find the projects lack data ownership and clarity of how the data, drawings, models, which otherwise must have been connected. We are witnessing the BIM adoption in the region, which is very welcome stuff, but still a lot of project owners are lacking in specifying data requirements and defining the data ownerships at very beginning of the project. A developer having multiple projects are run in silos where information comes from each project differently as how other stakeholders provide it, which in turn creates an issue such as lack of integrity, as no standard or intermediate checks are done for what owners might need at the end of the project. Most importantly, the owners become responsible for the data aggregation, which anyways is too late and can have issues with the data quality, which they wanted to use for the post handover for operations, assets, and facility management. A desired approach can be a very simple, as owner portfolio has defined data ownership at a very beginning of the project. We will discuss about who, what, and why further in this webinar. If we pause for a second and think about the projects where you would have worked or are currently working, how often a design model is issued to contractors after it fulfills owner-specific data requirements. If the data is organically being created, retained, shared, used, and maintained, you're already in a great scope of BIM lifecycle data management. But if at any stage of the project, the data from previous submission or stages doesn't get used and added with the next scope of project data, we must rethink about the project BIM scope. Ironically, construction industry is the only industry where the clients demand most inefficient processes across the project scope, which doesn't add value to the whole project. Now, if I may ask you to, who holds the responsibility of the decisions and will bear the direct impact of those decisions, you may type in the answers in the chat. Of course, the answer to this is always the owner. Now, owner whether they pay upfront, they pay based upon the variations, who is going to pay it at different stages. It is different. People have different opinions about that, but at the end of the day, whatever is spent in the project does come from the owner's pocket itself. Now, for that, let's quickly have a look at what BIM is about and how the BIM for owners could be helpful tool for them. So I'm sure most of you are familiar about BIM, but let's just try to revise it together to bring everyone in the same page. So BIM, or a building information modeling, starts from the essential idea of the physical design and considers the question about how the physical element components of architecture, mechanical, structural, interior, site, or in context can be represented as both geometry and information for a wide range of applications from the beginning and throughout the life cycle of the project. BIM applies to all phases of a building or infrastructure projects, starting right from planning or concept design to operations, maintenance, even for renovations or retrofitting. Every stakeholder in the BIM lifecycle has proven benefits of using BIM processes and methodologies. There is always a question, why do we get started? And answer is simple, start where it makes most value to the project outcomes. You can incorporate BIM process right at the beginning or planning stage. Getting your project using BIM for concept design is a good start from design perspective for the AEC industry. Identifying the BIM uses is critical exercise early in the project, as that will determine the level of detail you should be working on. Let's say we start with the concept design. Understand, what and how it will benefit to take the model and data to the next stage, like detailed design using the model data and information. How would you utilize the same for analysis, be in energy or structure design analysis? Taking that information across pre-tender stage to documentation, but must be from the same model, which also contains the property data from the graphics data. Tasks like as coordination, quantification, 2D documentation is part of BIM workflows and must be used. Using the BIM model and information should pass on to construction, where additional details and information can be added and then used for planning, estimation, fabrication, logistics planning, as well as site asset tracking, what has been completed, what has been delivered, what is in progress kind of task. The best place for BIM model is when it reaches the construction site and the model data is used and additional information about the assets is part of the handover, is added to the same equipment or assets which are derived from the BIM model. So the advocating here is like the BIM and the 2D, which industry definitely is in practice, cannot be two different set of documentation. They have to be together. The 2D must be derived from the 3D model, and that is how the benefits can be realized. Let me caution you that a 3D model does not equal to BIM. If the information is missing with the 3D components, it isn't a BIM model, but just a 3D. Information is the key data we are creating using sharing in the BIM models. The importance of the key information, properties must be understood. As a project, stakeholder, you and others make thousands of decisions which will impact the success of your projects. It is difficult to make good, sound decisions without good data. Data is compiled to create information, and information is the basis to provide you with the knowledge, and that knowledge you use to make the actual decision. It's all about improving the decision-making process. Decision-making always starts with the data, having the right data in the right format and accessible to the right people. Other aspects to consider is keeping the data available when it is needed, who needs it based on the project milestone. A single common data environment do help in keeping the information current without duplications and available to stakeholders throughout the project lifecycle. We see the four main value drivers which are important to the building owners. These value drivers shape the outcome that measure success. This means the maximizing portfolio performance, capital, project development, and operation efficiencies. At the same time, we hear from our owner customers that they are looking for different outcomes depending upon the stage of the asset. In capital planning, we hear owners care about gaining better insights into how their assets will perform and achieve an ROI to support their investment strategies in project execution. It's about having a certainty in the cost and schedule forecast. It's about mitigating risk and making sure the asset specified and designed is what is actually built. In operations, it's about generating revenue and profits, and so achieving the ROI as quickly as possible and reducing operational efficiency is key. A key component here is handover between construction and operations to ensure that physical assets is well documented so that digital information can be leveraged in the operation phases. A BIM adoption continues to rise as owners stands to benefit the most by implementing BIM as a tool to maximize a building's value throughout its life cycle. BIM potentially facilitates better informed owner decision making, design intent communication, project coordination across the various phases, enhanced project delivery, schedules, and budget management, post-construction assets and facility management, integrating building automation and controls, and many other benefits, including increased property resale value of the building occupancy rates and other metrics. Now, if we look at what does the BIM as a value for owners from the OM or FM or asset management perspective is, so it is very simple. The value of that information out of BIM is it allows the owners to get assistance in the field data collection about the assets which they will be managing later on. It allows to reduce the amount of time spent in the populating the database post handover of the project. It provides a platform for visualizing the asset location. So you don't have to look at the Excel sheets to look at the asset IDs. Why not have them in a visual format associated with the design and construction data associated with them? And also allows us to help in regulatory concerns from not having the data current and continuous from installation. It also brings us to another platform, so which is, for example, fundamentally, if we look at the UK level 2 BIM, which is about right thing for the project, and anyone who has worked with ISO 19650 standards will recognize the concept here. The challenge that many project teams have is that they start at point 4, like generating the information. This is today's reality. Majority of the owners, they start generating the information, so they do not look at the number 1, 2, and 3, but they start directly at generating the information and then hope that the collaborating or project management solution can help them meet the level 2 requirements. To be successful, frankly, the project's teams need to start at point 1, which is defining what is needed, creating a plan to deliver it, ensuring all parties or stakeholders working on the project are capable of delivering it, and continuing with managing the documents and data and complying with all the rules which are set. So which brings us, so how do we get started? And that is very important aspect of this webinar. So to get started, I'm going to start with what I call the 3 questions. So these 3 questions are very important and they were very relevant for the project owners to start their journey of BIM. So how do we get started with BIM for facilities, be it operations management, asset management, and so on? In a simple terms, we just begin the process of BIM, keeping end in the mind. So how do we begin the journey? It's easy when we answer the 3 questions we are about to discuss, the questions every project owner must answer, the question in which the solution is addressed in itself. So there are the 3 questions. First one is, who is going to use the data? What data are you collecting and how will the data be maintained? So these 3 questions are the pillars of, I would say, discovery in terms of how we are going to lead the information management of the facility requirements. So understanding the problem is very important, first of all. So if we look at the first point about who is going to use the data, it's very simple. The who is that end user. Do we have identified the business case for that user? First, very important is about the persona. Who would be the user of this data? We need to start by defining the goals, the tools, information needs, and future opportunities of this person or a user. What tools he or she will be using? Is the user field-based or office-based? what roles or departments is the user from, how the information will be beneficial to his or her current use cases or role. Who is the user of this data will help answer the key questions. It also means involving these users in defining your organization's BIM goals and requirements. If this is the end use, it must be defined at the beginning of the BIM process, beginning of the project, as they will define the need, use, and encourage why that data is important. As some of this data creation might need to happen at a design and not handover as an example. So it might be some data which the consultants might need to add, but not the contractor. So you need to start early defining these needs, and those needs will guide you to define who are the people in the project lifecycle responsible, or who are the data owners for that portion of the project. And first of all, if this is not a problem, what are we solving? So you need to exactly see the ratio, why we are actually trying to do it. Now, what we're also looking is what data are you collecting and how? This becomes a second question here. The second is that what data to be captured as our doing. It may not be benefits, because you might say, okay, give me everything, but are you going to use that every information? So you need to be very precise with that, defining the data capture, and most importantly, the person who is going to collect this data at different stages of the project. Data ownership is important. Periodic QA QC checks, again, is the data quality must be part of the process and not push it just at a final handover, as this may be too late to make or get necessary changes done. Owners or facility managers shouldn't be spending the time and effort post handover to figure out data integrity, quality, or use. Tools and processes are available today to make the BIM model and data handovers possible and get started on day one post handover. Which brings us to how the data will be captured. Will it be part of the model properties, or a new software managing those asset information, or just a spreadsheet at handover? Identifying benefits and use cases will help solve solve and choose the correct way of how to capture the information for post handover phase of the project. Most important, industry must start thinking about as maintained. We always have this terminology as built. So that is what a contractor is going to give to the owner. But majority of the time, that is not the end of this data. The data needs to be looked differently, and we need to change the way we look at this as built. It needs to go to a different vocabulary in the industry, and we need to start thinking about as maintained data. So the data about assets such as make, model numbers, serial numbers, space information also uses cases of supporting the project earlier. Defined property data set information will be very helpful. It will make it smoother for post handover projects and information. So typically the most data to be captured will decrease throughout the project, but the data ownership needs to be assigned upfront. Who needs to add that set of the data throughout the project? And data is created from day one of the project. Data such as design intent, data from the construction, commission, and handover. Most important is who is best suited to capture that data at relevant stages of the project, and how are you planning to aggregate the data needs to be specified as part of the project requirements. Earlier, the better. As an example, asking contractors to also add design data at handover might not be feasible and anyways too late in the process, but allowing the design intent model to carry forward the design information to construction phases, and then contractors adding that additional information from the construction data points will be the ideal solution. Data aggregation should not be one person's role, which is typically happening today at the post handover, but every stakeholder must fulfill their part. So you need to see who and what is the methodology you're going to use for data handovers and how we're going to do it. As we move across the project stages, graphic data such as floor plans or elevations, etc., become less used, and more attribution data is used to make decisions. This helps us to identify the creators of this information, and which must be organically be created shared and used. So what I'm educating here is the data must be shared, it must be used, and the roles must be defined at an earlier stage of, who actually needs to capture and what data. As an example here, different stakeholders add property data relevant to their phase of the project. As say it is design intent or construction model, say at schematic stage, the requirements of the information for a door is height, width, type, and material. As the design progresses to design development or construction phases, data such as specifications, fire ratings, acoustic information must be added by relevant stakeholders. Similarly, at the shop drawing or say construction stage, manufacturer model frames, finishes, extra is added, which at final installation could add date, asset IDs, barcode information, warranty information. The key here is different stakeholders who are the actual owners of that information, and they must add this information, and this information must flow to the next stage of the construction phase, and then that stakeholder in the next phase must add the additional information which is assigned to them to the same element or to the same BIM object. And that is where we can expect that capturing and making sure the data aggregation happens from the design to handover organically as defined by the project owner will be the best solution for using BIM as a conduit for using BIM for facilities, operations, asset management successfully. And of course, repeat the steps in each project. Typically, what you see on the right-hand side is what an owner or facility manager would need specify, but at the same time, making sure to identify the right stakeholder for the right information who are best suited to capture their part. This data ownership is must, or else owners will still be aggregating the data manually post handover. And don't forget, everyone would, even a very simple example is the name of the door might be different from different stakeholders, or different projects might give a different name, and it will be a manual task for an owner or the owner representative to make sure that this door is identified in a proper way in a facility management solution they will be having or trying to use. So another question we have is how the data be maintained, because this is the usage, the actual usage is how the data will be maintained, which brings us to this third question is, which shall help the integrity and the confidence downstream while using the data for facilities? We must answer, if this data can't be maintained, then why capture it all? What could be at the risk having separate graphical and attribute data moving forward? That is the typical scenario what today a lot of people have 2D information, and then they have another solution which has information in tabular formats like spreadsheets. This is where every organization must look for integrations available for their existing systems or using a new system to help address portfolio requirements. There might be a need to define how the attribute and graphical data will be updated post renovation or maintenance. So you need to make sure that this graphics data, it could be like a 3D model view here, and the attribute data assigned to these 3D elements, they should not be separated at post handover. They do form a very cohesive solution together, and that must be applied, and that there's a solution are available in the market, frankly speaking, and you could exploit those available integrations available today with your organizations. Now, let's look at some of the available tools you can use today to look for data capturing, data checks, as well as making sure that you build with the confidence. Now, this is an example. I'm going to run some predefined videos here, but giving you a hint here that this is a possibility of having a solution where you can use interoperability kind of tools to get your needs defined. And as an example here, let's say in a project, we need to make sure that it's easy. The users could add the classifications which are defined by the users. They could be based upon the IFC standards. They could be based upon the, let's say, US databases, UK databases, or even the custom specifications or classifications defined by the project requirements itself. and they can be automated. They could be added at an appropriate stage in the project by an appropriate data owner, and you could easily manage it. And the good example here is the owner specifying them at an early stage, and then the project stakeholders all assigning them at an appropriate time. And once this is done, you do not need to worry about what needs to happen. So once you define what database you're going to use, so that database is very easy. So you assign, okay, I'm going to use, let's say, IFC database. It could be a data mapping, how the data can be exported from one solution to another. As I said, there are possibilities. These are possibilities that you can have your own custom database of the classification, which you can assign, or you can use IFC, or you can use the UK templates or US templates. But I'm a big fan of having the custom ones, which you can anyways use the tool to create those custom based upon the project requirements, and then assign them to your project. So that's where you will be able to get it majority of the value. And by the way, you can open these in the Excel, for example, to verify and update if there is any changes you need to make at any stage. Now, once this is done, it's as I said, it's very, very easy to add these specifications. So first example was defining or specifying what database of classification we're going to use. And in this example, where we're trying to use is a classification. In this case, we're going to use, for example, we're going to assign a classification which is based upon the uniformat, master format, omni class table 21, 22, 23, and you could automate the addition to the required model elements while keeping the standards across all the projects and portfolios. It's easy, fast, reliable, and you can actually adopt it today to moving forward. It's easy. As I said, you can select multiple elements and assign these classifications in an easy manner, so you can actually get what you need. And once it is assigned, it's available as a metadata. And this metadata later on, it can progress throughout the project lifecycle. And this is the metadata, this classification information. If you need it at a handover stage, if you need it in the facilities, this will be available, a part of your BIM submission, a part of your BIM model. And this is where you will benefit more. And also, there's always the data we're talking about. So while we're talking about the specific equipment data additions to the model, one thing to remember is this needs to be standardized across all the projects to maintain data integrity. Again, what data is needed depends on the 3 questions we spoke earlier, but this must be addressed at the very beginning of the project. Consistency of the data formats is the key and helps in already available. And this is already available, and it will help in maintaining and creating this data today. So you could select the library elements where you want to assign a particular data sets, and then particular data sets will help you to make sure that you can apply the equipment data, whether to the library equipment, whether it's an architecture element, structural element, or MEP element, and you can be rest assured that this data, if you already have standardized it, and it could be the same throughout every similar element in your BIM model, based upon what has been specified or assigned by the project owner itself, you could be rest assured that this data is now valuable. It has a standard namings, it has standard formats, it is what is being asked, this is what is being required. And again, customizable data, which you can anyways use it. And which also brings us to another requirement when we talk about this. So one of the requirement is the spatial data awareness of the equipments from the model. So it is one of those requirements when we talk about BIM, and then this data needs to have the awareness about the room or the space they belong to. You can add the project specific spatial data using the tools already available in the industry, which will help you save time and build quality data enabled BIM models. Just remember, a 3D model isn't a BIM model without a data useful across the project stages. The data in this example is already available in the model, but not everyone applies the spatial data information to the model element. Again, this is already available. You can use it today, and just by following simple steps in the wizard. So we could simply define, okay, which elements needs to be having this kind of information. We can assign the zoning information, the space information, which by the way is one of the criteria when we talk about the post handover or the facility management. They must have a space awareness. So we can assign them from the templates. We will already have the templates are possible. You can add that data to a group of the objects. You can define the value. You can define the unit, and this database is customizable. You can define why this data needs to be there. And once it's applied, this data will be available as a part of your BIM submission of the model data itself. So you don't need to worry about why and how can I add or automate adding these kind of information in the project spaces and getting this done. So automatically, this will get data as a property set assigned to your BIM models in there. Now, once we have created this data, whether we're talking about spatial data, equipment data, classification data, this data as part needs to be checked against the set standards. We definitely have the tools available to check the model against the standards we have. So once data has been defined, added, there must be a thorough QA and QC checks in place in all phases of the project. It should be part of the submissions in design as well as construction phase to the handover project. Now, this cannot be the owners doing it at the end of a project. If a consultant is involved, they should be running these checks at their stages of the project. The contractor must be doing the same to verifying the 3D as well as the information data in the project. So in this example, we have a set rules to check our BIM model against certain parameters. By the way, these parameters are customizable, and you define what parameter you want to check. Rules can be custom built or just simply use many of the leading industry checks available with the tool. You can verify and check model integrity as well as metadata associated based upon your project outcomes, which you would have specified as part of the BIM workflow and customized the checks accordingly. The tools and processes are available, and you can incorporate them today to make data integrity successful with confidence. Now, in this example, what you see here is we have run a check, and this check is looking at some of the model elements. It could be as simple as looking for the duplicate elements, or looking for if the fire rating on the elements have been assigned, or if the fire rating from the previous submission is as accordance to that. So it will do a check. It will guide you back to the model elements where what this needs to be checked exactly what happened. So if we look at here, it's giving me an option that there are duplicate elements in, for example, in the curtain wall segment here. There are generic models. There are in place families. No, there is nothing. There is no mass element, for example, to check. And it will loop you back to the objects to see where exactly these issues might have happened. So when you fix those things, you run the check again, and you will identify, okay, now we have passed the object, and we like, in this case, for example, looking at the fire rating, the mark number, type, it could be anything you have specified as an example here. But once you have defined that, you run the checks. So these checks, in this case, we're just checking the fire rating in here. And once we run that check, it will look every element where the fire rating is supposed to be, and because we define which elements when we need to check the fire rating, and then we have an answer. If everything is defined with the value as per the required, you could also have set the values which must be there. For example, fire rating value should be between 1 to 3 or 1 to 2. You could set the criteria, and if it is not between that, it will highlight that there's an issue and all that. So going forward with that is very, very simple, and it's easy steps to follow. And you can, as I said, you can customize your own BIM data requirements. You can check the 3D model integrity as well as the information or the properties or the assets information or the attribute information using these kind of quality checks at any stage of the project. But my advice here is do not wait for the end submission, and make it as a habit throughout the project lifecycle by all the stakeholders of the project. Now, finally, if need arises, there is always a need. The data schema which you would have identified needs to be exported to a format such as COBie, or your own custom data formats to be used for your post-handover project requirements, such as operations, facilities, and asset management. Today, we have tools available which will help you which will help you to process just in few clicks away. The key here is the data format you must have defined. As I said, Kobe is, for example, available, but in case you are following your own data formats which needs to be exported, which can be actually customized. And once this is customized, you could set those rules and you can export this data, just using few clicks from the tool, and this wizarding tool will help you to save this information. The format will be very easy. You can export the data in an Excel format, just in case you are looking for Kobe data sheets and all that, which is available. I mean, you don't have to develop anything. You don't have to worry on how we get started. It's available in the market. It's about how you prepare and define the data and work in it. So what should I ask for? If we summarize all these things, so what should I ask for? There are different things which we definitely need to look for. The discussion must happen at the start of the project about what data formats will be used. Why are those important? Where will be the value? Where will be the use of native file formats, for example, and where the IFC or open BIM format files will be used? What is the plan for data sharing or setting up the common data environment where the project would not need conversion or other formats for viewing or just data drops happening? Discussions and frameworks must be in place to create, use federated model structures extracted 2D only from approved QA/QC checked BIM models. Also, structure such as COBie or custom project specification data standards based on the project scope must be defined at the beginning of the project. A clear and binding data ownership defined is the key to help scope the submission across the various disciplines. Organizations throughout the project lifecycle. Most importantly, start with the end in mind. Answer the 3 critical questions we discussed earlier. So we look at process of transformation. Who is going to use the data? So very simple. You need to find that end user understanding. What data are you going to collect and how? BIM project execution plans, model development specifications, BIM data QA/QC process will help. How will we maintain? What is the data maintenance plan? Or you need to exploit or explore available integrations which could help you to use this data later at the post handover stage. And more importantly, ensure the elements in your model are properly identified, tagged. Standardize is the key here to success. Once the standardization is in place, validate these models progressively at each stage. The models, they must be checked against the compliance based upon the data and the model standards done, and deliver these this information in the format, whether it's model based, drawing based, or data extracted based, but this needs to have a consistency, scope, and everything in there. All right. So with that, I think my session is almost over. I think I was bang on time on 11:45. So, but in case you have any questions, you can type them, and let's see if we have time to answer most of this.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for this very interesting presentation. So door is open for any question. You can just raise your hand or go on the mic simply, or you can write your question on the chat. And meanwhile, if you are joining our webinar for the first time, or if you didn't register your interest to join the buildingSMART chapter UAE as a member or as a speaker in our next future webinars, I shared a link on the chat, so please register your interest. Do we have any question for Mr. Raina?
Mr. Ali, sorry, I'm not using the one that contains the chat boxes. So is it possible to send a link somehow?
Is the chat box not enabled for everyone or just for you?
I really don't know.
Can somebody see the chat box?
I can see it.
Okay. Mr. Tony, right? You were
Yes.
talking? Okay. If I got your email, I will send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So let me start. Maybe. Do you have a question?
This will be shared, right? The recording will be shared?
Yes, the recording will be
Thank you.
shared on the website. Anyway, you can go to the website buildingsmartuae.ae. And
Okay,
there
nice.
is a button called register, so you can register, and there is a link called resources, so you will see the webinar recorded.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Raina, I will start not with this question, but just like to extend the discussion. You were talking today about BIM for facility management. How you see this is important as enabler for digital twin, or
Yeah.
for enabling a kind of building automation systems and having control over the building toward having smart building in the future. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, sure. I think this definitely is something we have been we get into discussions a lot these days about the digital twin, but one of the starting point when we talk about a digital twin is first of all digital transformation, and then digital transformation for the AEC industry is about BIM. So there cannot be any digital twin, frankly, without having data in a BIM format. So the key here is that when we try to use a digital twin which is available today for companies to explore. Now the digital twin adds another component. In a simple terms, we have a 3D model with the information, and then we are adding, for example, a sensor data to it, which allows us to monitor and take the corrective actions with respect to this data. So imagine you have a building which is in 3D, which has all the associated data associated with it, and then you're connecting the real world sensor data. So we are able to use this data which is coming from the BIM models, and then taking the real world data, which is sensor data, and clubbing them together in a platform. And that platform we could call as a digital twin in a very, very simplified terms. Now, again, this is important. People are asking about it. We definitely have seen interest about it. But again, it goes back to the question about, have you defined what your end goal is? It again goes back to, do you have a data which you will be able to utilize? Because if you do not have a data in the format which any platform of digital twin will use, you will not be able to utilize the benefit. And have you also been specifying these data formats? Because majority of the time what we see the owners struggling at the end of the project is multiple submissions happen in BIM, which we are glad that a lot of owners definitely are asking the BIM submissions, but they are not defining their own requirements of the data. So data might not have what they need. They get a 3D model with some information in there, but maybe not that information what exactly they would want as a part of their facilities or operations and assets. And again, it goes back to the same question: is why do we get started? Digital twin starts with digital transformation, and digital transformation, the way leading to this AC industry, starts with the journey of BIM, embedding in all the stakeholders. So data ownerships, data stages, progressing throughout the project, and then leading it in a proper format, which is going to be used by the owner at the end of the project, is the key. And then it can be enabled with a platform like digital twin.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Dr. Ali.
Do you have any feedback, any comment, any question? Don't be shy. We would like to use the time left, like 10 minutes, to extend the dialogue. I have maybe one small question. You were talking about it's important to define standardized information requirement for the BIM, and you talk about copy and the importance of standardization, and we have to specify this in a very early stage in the project. So if I think about the number of possible attributes for all equipment in the building, the doors, the windows, the operation of devices, some information are not available or will be dynamically changed with time. There is a
Yes.
kind of recommendation. How you see, first of all, the support for Autodesk product for exchanging this information and exchanging the BIM model in a standardized way? And what is, in your best, in your opinion, the best, how to say, balance between adding as much as information in the BIM model or linking this information with facility management systems or with other system externally? Can you maybe?
Perfect. Excellent question, Dr. Ali. So this is, I mean, this is where we as I started earlier, you know, so today what happens is the BIM models, they do contain information. It's not like, because some of the information comes automatically when an element is created in any BIM authoring software. So I can name all of these. So the information is definitely created. But the question here is that the information what an owner would need at the end? Maybe owner is not interested to know what is the finished detail for a door handle, maybe, but what he's interested is to know what is the barcode information of that. So now when we look at this information exchange, first of all, how to make it, how to make the information valuable is, as I said, we need to identify the use first. So once we have identified the use of that facility, why somebody is going to use it and what is the user's need for that. So that is where we can go back and start from the end, say, okay, this is, let's say, chiller. What are the 10 things a chiller might need at post handover during operation? So once we have defined that, then we identify, okay, these are the 10 things. Or out of the 10 things, what information consultant must add, and what information contractor must add, and what information an owner needs to add or may not need to add anything. So once we define those, so we might end up, okay, there are 3 elements which the consultant needs to add. It could be, for example, the the flow rate, for example, or the electric circuit number, which is going to connect and all that. And similarly, it might be the asset ID, the warranty details, the contractor who installed, or replacement manual and all that, which could be added by the contractors. But first defined by the owner based upon what they actually are looking for. So that is where it starts from. But at the same time, we definitely have seen that the industry is trying it. It's not like nobody's doing it. A lot of people are trying it, but there are certain things which are still not very clear with a lot of people. One of them is, how do you make this data exchange happen? And for the data exchange to happen, if you refer to ISO 19650 or UK BIM levels and all that, everyone is advocating to have a common data environment. So the common data environment where the data sits at the center, and every persona or a consultant or stakeholder, when they work on these projects at a different stages, they work on that data directly to add that information relevant to that goal. And it's also very important to make sure that the information is not added beyond what is not needed, because if it is not needed, why to add that? That's one goal, because a lot of people add a lot of information which is not needed by anyone throughout the life cycle. But what is that information is needed? So once we have defined that, we assign the data ownership that portion, which can be part of the BIM requirements early in the project execution itself, and then different stakeholders take it up and add their portion. But keeping the data at the center using a common data environment will help, and then everyone can work on that. And of course, we need to have those regular checks in place to see whether, because manual mistakes can happen and people might do it in a different way than expected. Just for example, small case to uppercase, might or a spell mistake on a door name kind of thing. So very simple, minute things, but which might have an effect in the software which the owner might be using at the end of the facility management. There are multiple solutions. For example, Archibus is there, IBM Maximo, or even Autodesk. We have a platform. I don't call it a tool. I call it the platform, like Tandem, for example. So these are some of those tools. For example, they could incorporate them, but making sure the data integrity. Even simple example I always say is name itself is a very important. If that is something which associates something from the model to the facility management software to allow it to tag properly, that must be checked. So those thorough checks are very important to be made there.
Okay, thank you. Maybe using name convention and so on. So we have hand raised by Engineer Hadil. Please go ahead. Engineer Hadil, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, sorry, I was talking to myself. It's muted. Okay, first, thank you for the presentation. And I have a question here regarding the owner requirements, since we are talking about that we need to know what is the owner requirements from the beginning of the project. So I believe that we are talking here about the EIR, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
how is the EIR is translated into the how and what and when to provide the information? Can you simplify the process for us from the ERI to information availability?
Perfect. Yeah. Lovely. I think I wasn't, I didn't use those terms
Yeah,
because
you did not
some,
mention EIR.
yeah, but thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate that help. So
Mentioning that the EIR is the employer information requirements. So he should
absolutely,
fill
absolutely.
this form or this, I don't know, application or whatever, and he has to mention what is required. And I have another question, by the way. If the owner is not very familiar with BIM, he
Mhm.
can do an EIR or not?
Yeah, I mean, see, it is how people will realize the benefit, because everyone needs to, whether they do it themselves or they have a consultant to do it for them, but it needs to be defined. I mean, there are people in the market, or the owners in the market, asking for BIM, but that is just 3D. They ask, actually, the information they don't check, they don't actually validate, they don't have it mentioned, and sometimes the consultants don't know what has been asked. They just have to do a BIM submission, and they just get a model done after they finish the 2D design, which is very bad. So I mean, and unfortunately, that's a lot of companies do that. I shouldn't say that, but that does happen, I mean, design keeps on happening in 2D, and 3D portion is being subcontracted to someone to make a 3D model and submit it as part of the requirement of BIM, which is typically killing the advantages for the owner itself. That's why I was saying that 2D must be extracted from 3D. Now, going back to the EIR portion. So EIR, I mean, it comes as a very handy tool, because if you link it from an ISO 19650 perspective as well. So EIR is the first thing what must happen in a project. Let's put it this way. But at EIR, what should be in the EIR is an owner defining that person, the use within their own project. So that EIR, once they define what actually they're going to use this data for post handover, that's what is going to be based upon who from the project as an owner, or the facility manager who's going to be managing it later on, will be using this information for. So once they identify that, those requirements will be part of that information in the EIR. So that can be bundled into that requirement. So that BIM requirements coming from that owner will automatically become a document. So if they have defined it in there, number one, they define it, who's going to using it, why they need it, because definitely they need to look at pluses and minuses, whether this information in this format or this content is relevant, what additional they need to make that list of about every equipment. For example, an owner can look at Kobe, which is already available, in the market, so they can see how the Kobe is actually already formulated a kind of framework for owners to look at what information is needed, but which they can even reference it and use it of their own. But once this is defined, then they also need to define what is the platform they want to use. Maybe they still want to maintain it in an Excel file, so they might have to have a mechanism of getting this information in Excel, or if they have a solution already in place in-house, because a lot of owners have in-house custom built solutions which were based on 2D. Maybe they want to explore integrations with something which will bring the BIM model with the 3D and the information together, because it will be, again, a lot of wastage of time and effort if at post handover people are still extracting the information separate, the graphical information and separate attribute information. Again, it's going to create that useless information. Again, two multiple sources of truth. One place you search for it in a 3D, one place you search for it in 2D, and this is where we start. So once owner defines how they're going to use it and why they're going to use it, and that criteria will be part of that EIR. And then that EIR needs to see, when it goes back to the BEP force, or when the consultant is bidding and they are saying BEP, they will come up, okay, this is the portion we can define. I mean, they will take up the design portion of the data. If the consultant has a requirement, some design elements, part of the metadata, they will definitely say, yeah, this is the portion we do. This cannot be in our scope. And then that portion, when the contractor is appointed, they will take up the other portion of that scope, which needs to be done. But there's also one very important thing which industry must address, and I can only make a request on that, is let BIM go from consultants to contractors, that the models and the data information go in that format to the contractors. Because what we see, we don't see every project where the consultant design model is being handed over to contractors. A lot of time contractors start from the 2D drawings back from, or even they just still get some still get PDF drawings, and then they start building the BIM models one more time. And it is waste of information which was already created earlier. And the buildup of that information is going to, and honestly, who pays for it at the end of it? If somebody is putting in effort, if a contractor is putting in extra effort of creating the model, they're going to bill it back to the owner, while owner could have made a smooth transition as part of the BIM standards, or as part of their BIM appointing parties, that the data ownership, once you're completing the phase, must be submitted to the next phase, and vice versa, and handover similarly. So it should happen in that progressive format. Once that is, I think, sorted, we will live in a very good environment of real BIM frameworks in the projects. And thanks for the question, Engineer Hadil.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer.
You're welcome.
So we almost passed the time for the webinar. If we don't have any further question, I would like to thank all of you for attending, and especially thank our speaker for today, Mr. Vijay Raina, for the very nice, interesting webinar. I encourage all of you to register your interest, and if we have on board any people who have any topic on mind which is related to BIM digital transformation, and any topic related to how to improve the construction industry, we are open to welcome you in the next webinars as a speaker. With this, I will close the recording of the meeting. It will be the webinar. It will be published on the website in almost 2 or 3 days. And thank you again. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, for accommodating me and Autodesk on this occasion. And hopefully we can continue in the next vision. I mean, let us know what topics you might want us to present, and we'll be happy to join in the next session. And everyone who joined this morning and took your valuable time out for us to listen, thank you very much for your time. And if you have any further questions, please reach out, and I will be happy to connect with you as well to address some of these questions you might still have. Thank you very much, and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.